Good morning, grade 12s. Today we're getting into the nitty-gritty of chapter 9. We are going to look at the different challenges that happens in the different business sectors and the environments, and then we're going to look at the extent of control. Remember, I did mention this entire chapter is basically revision from grade 10, grade 11. So we are doing this, but you should actually know this. Okay, this should be easy breezy. Right, so what do we mean when we talk about the business sectors? We said that business sectors are subdivisions of economic activities. So we group certain types of economic activities together into a subdivision. And the three different business sectors that can be identified is the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. The primary sector is the sector that deals with the extraction of raw materials and natural resources. So all businesses that are involved with cultivation or extraction from resources from nature will be grouped under the primary sector. What are natural resources? Okay, natural resources are those resources that we remove from nature. They are not man-made, they are made by nature, but we remove them from nature so that we can use them in the production of goods and services to satisfy our needs. Right, so it's stuff like coal, gold, fish, animals, livestock, plants are extracted, they are removed. Extraction means we are removing them from nature so that we can use them. Examples of primary sector industries includes mining and quarrying, fishing, forestry, and farming. Now, obviously, there are other examples as well. These are just some examples. When we move on to the secondary sector, this is the business sector that is responsible for processing. Right, so all of those raw materials that we receive from the primary sector goes to the secondary sector where they are processed into useful products. Okay, so there's the responsibility of the secondary sector is to take those raw materials from nature and process them, use machinery and equipment and turn them into useful products so that people can use them to satisfy their needs. So it includes manufacturing factories, so all the factories where they are producing stuff. They take a whole bunch of crap and they turn it into something useful. It includes construction, the whole entire building industry, and then energy generation, electricity, gas and water, energy generation. Okay, so when we process coal into electricity, that is secondary sector. When we process coal into petrol, that is secondary sector. We are producing something out of a raw material. Examples of secondary sector activities includes manufacturing, so production, processing, and construction. The tertiary sector is the last one. The tertiary sector is also known as your service industry. They have the responsibility of providing certain services to members of the public and to businesses, also to the government. Right, they include services from transport, banking, legal services, health services. They are involved with the distribution of goods and services. So basically your primary sector removes raw materials from nature. They give those raw materials to the secondary sector. In the secondary sector, those resources are processed into something useful. And then in the tertiary sector, the useful goods and services are then distributed to the final consumer, as well as a whole bunch of services that are provided to primary sector businesses, secondary sector businesses, other tertiary sector businesses, to members of the public, to people, to consumers, to the government. There's a whole bunch of services that can be delivered. Examples of tertiary sector services include transport, okay, for example, to transport the raw materials from the primary sector to the factory in the secondary sector, to transport the finished goods from the factory to the shop, for example. It includes banking and financial services. Okay, so for example, to provide loans to the farmer in the primary sector so that he can buy a new tractor to use on his farm. It can include any financial services provided to consumers, okay, loans, bank accounts, any financial services. It includes retailers, okay, so places that sell goods and services to the final user, like Pick n Pay, like Checkers, like President Hyper, like Edgar's, the shops we go to purchase goods and services from. Retailers, they provide commercial services, part of the tertiary sector. And then legal services, okay, legal services can also be provided to the primary sector and secondary sector, to other tertiary sector, to the consumers. Now, if people get involved into trouble or whatever, you want to sue somebody because their products made you ill or whatever, that will happen in the tertiary sector. Now, very important, and you will see in the next lesson as well, that you must be able to identify the business sector that a particular business operates in from a given scenario. So you are going to be given a particular scenario, and the very first question is going to be, which business sector does this business operate in and why? If we now look at the possible challenges that happens in the different business environments, and then how much control do the business have over that? Right, so possible challenges can be, for example, difficult employees. Difficult employees that come late for work, they don't meet their deadlines, there's a high rate of absenteeism, they don't come to work, they don't do their job, right? There's a lack of vision and mission, okay, in the business. The business doesn't have a vision and a mission statement. There's a lack of adequate management skills. The managers in the business, they don't know what they're doing. They've got no managerial skills. They've got no people skills. They're fighting with everybody all the time. The people don't cooperate with them. And then lastly, unions, strikes and go-slows. Okay, so labor issues. Okay, your workers go on strike. Your workers on a go-slow. They pitch up for work, but they work very slowly. They can't meet their deadlines. The unions are hassling you and making demands. Right, this will all happen in the micro environment. So all of those are possible challenges that can happen in the micro environment of the business. And in terms of the micro environment, the business obviously has full control. Remember, we said the micro environment is the environment within the business itself. So the business owners, the managers of this business have full control over what happens inside of the business, which is the micro environment. Right, so more challenges, things like competition. Remember, competition are other businesses that is in the same industry as you that are basically selling a similar product to what you are selling. Consumers are either going to buy from them or they're going to go buy from you. So your competition, those other businesses that provide a challenge to you, it's a threat to you, because your consumer might stop buying from you and buying from the other guy. You don't want that. If there's shortages of supply, obviously your supplier, you depend on your supplier for raw materials. And if you cannot get the raw materials from your supplier because there are shortages for whatever reason, a drought, whatever, obviously that is a challenge to you. You cannot produce unless you have access to your raw materials. Demographics and psychographics. Remember, demographics is the characteristics of the population. If your customers are male or female, their age group, their likes or dislikes, where they are. Okay, psychographics is basically when people have different interests or attitudes. All right, so some people, for example, really care about the environment. Some people don't, okay, but some people do. So if your production process, for example, creates a whole lot of environmental pollution, your customers feel that, they feel very strongly about the protection of the environment. For you, this is going to be a challenge because you are going to have to change your production method to appease your customers. Otherwise, they might stop buying from you. All right. Last one, socio-cultural factors. If, for example, your customer base is very poor, okay, so your business, your shop is in a very poor area, So factors like poverty is a social factor. If there's a drop in income, people are losing their jobs, that is a challenge for them, but it is also very much a challenge for you, because if your customer base loses their jobs and they don't have money, they cannot buy from you. It will pose a challenge to you. All of these challenges are challenges of the market environment. Okay, remember we said the market environment is the environment immediately outside of the business. Now, anything happening with your customers, your suppliers, your supply chain, right? That'll be part of your market environment. And in this environment, you have limited control. All right, obviously you cannot control what your consumers do. You cannot control what your competitor or your supplier is doing, but you can control how you react to what is happening in your market environment. More challenges. Okay, if there's changes in income levels, if there's contemporary legislation, in other words, the government passes new laws, there's labor restrictions that is imposed on you, there's political changes, the political environment is changing, interest rates are going up or down, socioeconomic issues, HIV and AIDS, globalization, international challenges, changes in the exchange rate, okay? All of these are challenges of the macro environment. And obviously, if you just look at that list of challenges, in the macro environment, we have absolutely no control. Us as the business have zero control over the laws that the government is making. We have zero control over the political climate in the country. We have zero control over what the Reserve Bank is going to do with the interest rates. We have no control whatsoever on the exchange rate. All of these will affect our business, but we have no control. There's nothing we can do to them. Once again, we can only control our reaction and what we do in answer to the challenges when they happen. Right, now what you must be able to do is, first of all, you must be able to quote a business challenge from a scenario. So if you are given a particular scenario, it must be possible for you to find the challenge, identify what is the challenging situation for the business in the scenario. Then you must be able to classify these challenges according to the business environment. So once you have identified the challenge, you must be able to say this challenge is a challenge that is part of the micro environment or macro environment or market environment. You must link the challenge to the business environment. Okay, so remember when we mark these questions, if you identify the business environment wrong, you cannot get the marks for the challenge either. Okay, so it must link. Then also very important that you must state the extent of control that the business have over each business environment. So if you have identified the challenge, you have identified the business environment, you must also know what is the extent of control that the business have inside of this identified business environment.